Welcome to the Human-Animal Connection Show, where we believe we can communicate with all animals. Join us as we explore the 33 principles and healing methods of the human-animal connection. As animal lovers, we know that you share our commitment to making the world a kinder place for all creatures. Together, let's embrace the transformative healing power of the human-animal connection.
Hi, welcome back to the Human Animal Connection. I am host Mike Overly, and I am with Jeannie Joseph. Jeannie, what are we talking about today?
Today, we're talking about principle number 6 in the human-animal connection, which is love beyond words. And this is where we explore how sharing love with an animal changes both of us, changes us and changes the animal. Yeah.
Wow, let's go. I can't wait to hear about it.
Yeah.
So what is it about animals that elicits pure love, right? So sometimes we have an ache that only an animal can heal. What does that look like?
Yeah, well, it's so interesting because sometimes we need words, and words are really important. And, to be human is to have words. But sometimes we need this other kind of love that is beyond words, doesn't need words, that is just visceral, it's just tactile, it's just visual, it's just auditory, but not with words. And this can touch us in ways that sometimes words can't. And I'm not in any way against words. I'm a writer. I just wrote a huge book, right? So this is not an anti-word conversation. This is a conversation about and how else can we experience love at the nonverbal level? Because the great thing about the nonverbal level is that it bypasses the thinking mind. And the thinking mind, of course, is as humans where we can get into all kinds of trouble, where we can dwell on the past or obsess about the future, just beat the living out of ourselves. So having this love that doesn't involve talk can be a very powerful way to enrich your life. And I think it was the guy who wrote The Little Prince who said, your soul is not awakened until you've loved an animal.
Wise man.
Yeah, definitely.
So what does it mean to love beyond words, like in the grander sense? What does that look like? What does that mean for us?
Yeah, well, as humans, we struggle a lot with words and, do you love me? And what does that mean? And if I say I love you, it means one thing to me and it means something different to you, perhaps, so it gets very, very complicated when we bring words to try to jumpstart the experience of love. And sometimes what we need to do is just be in the body, just be in the experience. And animals help us do that. They just bring us into the present moment where we're not so concerned with narrating and getting the story on, getting each other on the same page word wise. It's just a level of pure presence. And that experience where we really see an animal and an animal really sees us really does something that heals us in ways that words can't.
That's amazing. That's fascinating. I think that takes me back to the idea of unconditional love, right? There's no expectations on either side. Right. There's no stories shaping what that looks like. It's just being in it.
Yeah. And I think, sometimes when people hear the word unconditional, it becomes like this unreachable thing. And the truth is that love does have conditions, unless we're saints. If we're in this human experience, we are going to have conditions. We want our dogs to behave a certain way. We don't want them to behave a different way. So those are conditionals. But I think that we can keep striving towards the experience of just deeply appreciating the animal for who they are, what their unique purpose is, and for what they bring to our experience. And one of the reasons why it's so wonderful to be with animals is that they do relate on that level. They do see us just as our essence, just as our nature, and they don't care how much money we make or what the color of our skin is or where we went to school or any of those outer things. They just are really interested in what's right here, right now between us. And that's that connection.
Love that. Absolutely love that. So you had mentioned during our conversations an author who I absolutely love, Jeffrey Masson.
Yes.
And he's written a number of wonderful books, but one, Dogs Never Lie About Love.
Yeah.
Right. So
yeah.
what is unambivalent love like? I'm not familiar with that term.
Okay, so this is a term that I was just using, but basically the concept is that animals have the ability, as humans, it's like, well, I love you, but I hate this about you, or I love you, I wish you were different in this way. It's not that I don't love you, but I just can't stand this thing you do. It's very complicated. We have this, love for us is like this really, it's like a minefield. It's got good stuff, it's got fear stuff, it's got controlling stuff, it's got, nurturing stuff, it's got all of it. So it's very confusing for us lots of times. But dogs is like, if they love you, they love you. They're not ambivalent. They don't love you, but kind of hate you, or, they just love you. They're not annoyed with you, the way you pronounce words or whatever it is. They're just here to have a very pure experience. And the name of that book, The Dogs Never Lie About Love, meaning they don't fake it. They either like you or they don't. They can be afraid of certain people, but if they love you, they love you. And that's very clear. And to have that, what, in heart math, they would call that a coherent experience, meaning that, you're completely in alignment. Your heart, your soul, your mind is functioning as a single unit. And animals are more likely to be in that coherent state if they haven't been traumatized. Of course, if they've been traumatized, then they're having some of the challenges we're having. But if they're, relatively healthy, they're in a state of pure experience. I love you, or I like you, or I'm curious about you, or whatever that particular experience is. It's very complete and full. And in human interactions, oftentimes our encounters have mixtures of things. We have a boss that we maybe respect, but we don't like, or we hate, but we are fearful, or, there's a lot of emotions, even though we come in and be nice and interact in ways that are appropriate, which is good choice at work, but the fact is it takes a toll on our nervous system, because it puts us in an incongruent state where we're not able to express what we really feel and be truthful to our own, what our body is saying. And being with the animals, since they're more often in that state than not, they really help us do that.
Yeah, I've experienced that myself. We've talked about Darby. He was like the catalyst for all this change in my life. And he could bring me right back to that place.
Yeah.
So quickly, because he was already there, right? He could attain that state so fast, and he would help me shift myself to that place.
Yeah. It's really neat the way, I think one of the things that animals have that really can help us understand ourselves is they have often more emotional flexibility than we have. Like, they have all the emotions that we have, but they can move quickly through one state to another. So they can go from fear or irritation, and then you give them a treat and they're completely happy and in love again, or throw a toy or give them a pet, and all of a sudden, whatever it was that was scaring them, some noise outside, and they can choose, or whatever you would say the word is, I'm going to use choose. They would choose to be back to this moment, back to what's happening right now, even though 30 seconds ago there was a big scary noise out there, or a bad smell out there, or something else. They can very quickly choose a good experience, something that feels good. And that's something that we can really learn from them, is to be able to switch emotional states with more fluidity. So it's okay for us to be angry. It's okay for us to be scared. It's okay for us to feel guilty, but we need to not stay in those states. So like an animal, we need to move more rapidly through these emotional states so that we have more emotional flexibility, creates a more fluid state. I didn't watch the show, but my friend told me about Ted Lasso, and he used to have a saying about be like a goldfish. And what he meant by that is, in his use of the metaphor, goldfish only had a memory of 5 seconds. I don't believe that that's true. I don't know that that's science, but let's just say for the sake of conversation, goldfish have short memories. Okay. His point being is that forget what just happened 30 seconds ago. This is what's happening right now. So that's a valuable lesson, whether or not it's true about goldfish, because I think one of the things we're coming to understand is that fish do have memories. They do, so it may not be like as long-term as what we're used to. And I'm not sure what the length is, but point being is that they have the ability to just swim away from something that doesn't feel good and desirable to them and move towards what does. But I love those stories. Have you ever heard about the cleaner fish? Have you ever heard about them?
Mm-mm.
So there is, I forget what they are, a breed of fish, but they sort of call them cleaner fish, and they will clean off the parasites and debris and bad stuff on other fish. So the fish will come to like their spot, where this fish has sort of like a storefront, in the reef or whatever, and they will come to the cleaner fish that does the best job, because occasionally these cleaner fish will try to take a nibble of something that's not necessary for the patient, and of course it's not the fish won't come back to that fish. So they remember who the good cleaner fish are, who do the good job, and they'll come back to that person, that fish, even if that fish moves to a new location, they'll find the one that they like. So they make choices, right? So I don't know how you can say that they don't have memory when we see things like that. But anyway, the point being is that the notion of having a fluid relationship to your own emotions, that gives you permission to feel whatever you're feeling, but not to dwell on it forever. So one of the things people are sometimes, when I take them to my horse workshop called The Power of Presence, people are afraid to be near the horses because they know the horses can read their emotions, right? And they're afraid if they're angry or something like this or sad that the horse will take it on or not want to be with them or whatever it is. And what I explain is that the horse has no problem if you're angry. The horse has no problem if you're scared. The horse has a problem if you're angry but trying to be nice, or scared and trying to be bold. That's what's confusing for a horse, is when you are not being authentic, or in the HeartMath example, coherent with your emotions. That's what's tricky for them to process. So they have no problem if you want to come out there and cry. That's like, okay, you're sad. I can handle that. Or you're mad, or you're scared, or whatever it is. Just don't try to hide that emotion with some other behavior, because that's really confusing to a horse. And a lot of people have been taught, in the old world, you have to dominate your horse and you have to show him who's boss and all that kind of stuff, that nonsense that comes from that kind of thinking of dominance, instead of understanding that this is really a relationship and it should be about cooperation. So you can be angry, but just be angry for a moment. Don't try to hide it with pretending that you're sweet when you're not feeling sweet. You're feeling angry, and that's okay. You can be angry. So that the notion of emotions as being just pure energy, different frequencies of energy, and that we can move through these energetic states, gives us a lot more freedom and power over our own emotional life.
Well, an immediate thing comes to mind is when a dog, I'll use Indigo as an example. We're out and she gets, hackles, withers up over another dog she doesn't know coming towards us. And then after we pass, she shakes it off.
Shake it off, right?
Yeah, shake it off. And
shake it off is a beautiful thing.
Go. Yeah,
we're going to do a whole episode on shaking, because I really believe it's one of the secret healing tools that animals. You'll see this in the wild when a prey animal has been maybe stalked by a predator and they escape and they get to a safe place. The first thing they do when they're in that safe place is shake it off. And what they're doing, it's really wise, because they're shaking off the cascade of stress chemistry. The adrenaline and the cortisol literally has to be moved out. It can't just be like, okay, everything's fine now, life is good. You can't just talk it away. It's a chemical reaction in the body. And so the shaking, and you'll see dogs do that, this like 1, 2, 3, quick shake. Sometimes that's all it takes. They don't have to stand there and shake, in terror, but it's that quick shake off that helps them reset their nervous system. So you never want to stop a dog from shaking, and you always want to thank a dog for shaking, because they're showing you this beautiful example of, okay, I was scared or I was stressed by that situation, that other dog over there, but now I'm okay. I'm going to shake it off and I'm going to enjoy the rest of my walk. And that's what we can learn to do. We can learn to say, okay, yeah, there are these things that scare us, that make us mad, that confuse us, that frighten us, all this stuff. And we can have that experience, and then we can shake it off. We can choose to come back to right here, right now.
Yeah. I've worked with some of my clients on that, and I teach them to do this and see what the energy feels like when their dog does it, because it's electrochemical, right? But I talk about it in the form of energy and what it does to discharge that, right? We're trying to remove that charge of that state, whatever it is, and if we can discharge it, whether it's the dog or us, then that opens up room for something else.
Yeah, exactly. And, this is part of being a good human for your animal, is paying attention to these moments. And they're not bad moments, but we want to be paying attention to, okay, that was stressful and now we're shaking it off and now we're good. And it can help us understand that. And that's really important when we work with the therapy dogs, for example, in class. We're working with teenagers, and a lot of them are having tough times. I mean, you remember how tough teenager years was for us, but it's 20 times harder for them with what, school shootings and COVID and death. It's just such a hard time for teens now. And so when we bring the therapy dogs in to work with them, we watch really carefully, and we'll see sometimes different dogs. Our class is only an hour, but we'll see different dogs. They're not going to ready for the full hour. They're at 45 minutes or whatever that time is. They've had enough. And we just need to pay attention to that and give them a chance to have a break. And sometimes having a break is just going outside the circle, or just turning away, or turning to us, or withdrawing a little bit. And we want to give them the freedom to do that, because we know that that's important. And in this particular school that we're in, it's a fairly long walk back from the library where we meet to the car. And that walk is so important, because they get to sniff, they get to be at their own pace, they get to choose whether to stop or keep going or whatever. And that little walk really helps them to diffuse the energy. And usually by the time we get to the car, Sophia gets to the car, she's just so happy to be in the car. She was so happy to go there. She couldn't wait to get out of the car and go work with the kids. But after that hour, she's had enough, and she's ready to just be in the back seat and relax and chill and maybe get a treat. And it's beautiful to watch those cycles, so they can be very present for kids until they're full. If they've taken on too much energy, then they need to diffuse it. And as the human, you want to be the one to be observing and seeing, well, when has that dog had enough? And we had one dog who's still a puppy. We don't normally have puppies as therapy dogs, but we're training the woman who's working with this dog really hopes that this dog will become a therapy dog. So she's a little young to be in class, but she's in this period. She's 10 months old. So she's in what's called a second fear cycle, where it's very easy for them to be overreactive. And so the other day in class, the person very wisely recognized that her dog was getting overstimulated, was kind of acting badly, but it was just because of just too much stimulation. And she took the dog outside, and that's just perfect. We really support that. We're not saying, oh, you have to stay in the room for the whole hour. If your dog's had enough, your dog's had enough. So that's good for them and good for us, because sometimes we've had enough and we can't always leave the situation, but we can recognize that in ourselves and make whatever adjustments we can, even if it's after the fact, after the meeting. If we can't leave the meeting, but just recognize, you know what, I feel overwhelmed right now. Okay, I can deal with it later. But just recognizing that helps us to not be the victim of it.
Yeah,
that emotion. Yeah,
love that.
Yeah,
let's take a quick break here.
Yeah.
Okay, and we're back. Jeannie, this is outstanding. I'm having fun with this today.
Oh, good.
So I wanted to talk about, we've been talking about love, right?
Yeah.
And so I wanted to ask, when is love not enough?
Yeah, so this is a real challenging one for people who love their animals, and having an animal who's maybe getting ready to pass, who's at the end of their life, and maybe there is some illness or some pain or whatever. And we hope that just our love will be enough to make it right and to fix them, and they won't have to leave and they won't have to pass. But that's when we as humans have to recognize that it's not just about our love, it's also about the destiny, the soul of that animal, that being. So it could be, for some animals that it's time to go. And our love can sometimes be holding them back, like they're hanging around for us. They don't want us to grieve, and they don't want us to suffer, and they know that their passing is going to trigger a whole lot of tears, and they don't, they feel like, oh my God, I better hang in here as long as I can until I'm just a thread of myself. And so that's when humans have to recognize that loving an animal also includes letting go of an animal. And that's one of the things that they have. I believe that dogs in particular have come to teach us, dogs and cats, domestic animals have come to teach us, is the notion of loving with all your heart, losing, and loving again. I really think that is, in my experience, individual dogs have individual purposes, but that as a species, they really are doing that for us. And it can be very difficult. People need time to grieve, and I'm not suggesting that you run out and get a dog the next day, but a new dog. But when it's time, I think that is the what they're asking of us is this idea that we don't just have one love in us, that we have multiple loves in us. And people who've had many animals across their lives know that maybe one was just amazingly different and amazing, but it's still, you can love again. And that is what they are here to help us come to understand.
It's true. I had the most amazing experience when Darby passed about my ability to grieve that loss.
Yeah.
And what I got from that was actually it was a gift, right? And I mean, I still miss him, right? Because he was fantastic. He was nuts. He was fun. He was sweet and fierce at the same time. But he taught me so much about that I didn't have to have him, right? That I was able to love him fully, and then I need to let him go so that I can make space for another animal. And then it was many months later, and then Indigo came into my life. But I don't think I would have been able to be there for her if I hadn't have made that room and allowed myself to grieve Darby.
Exactly right. And I had one client that I was working with, and she was a very neat and clean person. She had a beautiful house, and she had 2 greyhounds, rescue greyhounds, and a potbelly pig, right? But she was a very clean person, and one of her greyhounds passed away, and the greyhound that was left was just grieving. I mean, like, just looked like this greyhound, the remaining greyhound, was going to go soon after, just so sad. And so she got another one, even though it was very soon after one passed, and they were doing okay. But then she called me and she said, the new greyhound, whose name was Bree, was pottying in the house. And this was after she would take the greyhound for a walk and go in the yard and get ready for work, and right in the door, plop, on her nice rugs. And she was just getting to the point where she wasn't sure whether she could keep this dog, because this was just too stressful, these ridiculous incidences after being out and doing that. And so she asked me to come and do an animal communication session, which I did. And what I asked Bree what was going on, and Bree said to me, she has no room in her heart for me. There's no room for me here. And I explained that to the client, and she, cried and realized it was absolutely true, that she was feeling like if she loved the new dog, she was being disloyal to the old dog. Even though she knew that wasn't true, she still felt it on an emotional level. And once she realized that she hadn't really opened her heart to the new dog, the accident stopped. And she she said, yes, I love you. I'm not giving you away. You're here. This is your home. Boom. 18 months later, there were no accidents. So this is really what we can do when we understand how emotions affect the animals, and sometimes even ways we don't realize.
Do you think there's a universal impulse to love animals?
I do. And, obviously not everyone loves animals, so maybe universal isn't quite the right word, but I don't know what other word I would use. So I would say that it's, it is so deep within us. Well, first of all, we are animals. Right? So sometimes we forget that. We think of them as animals and us as humans, and as if it was a complete divide. But the truth is, it's just a spectrum of animalness, that we have our spectrum of animalness, and a gorilla has their spectrum of animalness, and a giraffe behind me has animalness, so we're all animals in this. But what we were talking about earlier, the purity of the love with animals goes beyond words. It goes beyond, well, you're my husband or you're my wife or whatever function you serve in my life, to just simply the experience of pure love. So I think that it's very healing. And as you know, I've worked with over 4,000 service members and their families working with animal therapy. And I've just seen the ways in which animals can touch people in ways that would take me a lot longer. It would take me weeks and weeks to do what an animal can do in minutes. And that presence helps people come into right here, right now, which is where we need to be for our mental health.
How does loving an animal help us better understand ourselves?
That's a good question. So I think that when we see the way that animals, I'm going to use the word choose, maybe some scientists would disagree with me, but I'm going to say animals choose the present over the past more often than not. So that doesn't mean always. I do believe that animals have memory, and I do believe that they can remember good and bad experiences. So it doesn't mean that they're always in the present. They're just more likely to choose the present over the past. And that's something that when we see them do that, we can take that invitation. Like you mentioned, Indigo, seeing a dog on a walk that's acting a little maybe too rambunctious or slightly not friendly, not polite. And that can cause Indigo stress. And then when Indigo gets away from that situation, it's like, okay, we're walking, we're happy. I'm happy with my person, Michael, and so shake it off. And so that's something that we can really learn for ourselves, is the recognition there are going to be, whatever you want to call it, the bad dogs of life out there that startle us, disturb us, hurt us, say mean things to us, disregard our feelings, invade our space, do all this stuff. This is what life is on this planet, right? And so having a mechanism to recognize, this is uncomfortable, I don't like it, this is causing a reaction in my body, letting ourselves have that feeling. And then when we're maybe in the moment that we feel safe, or a few minutes later, or even that evening, whatever we can do, as soon as we can do it, to shake it off. And I know you're a fan of shaking. I've seen you do this. You'll just like shake yourself, just give yourself a little shake to tune yourself up. And I love that. I think that is just such a wonderful thing to do. And with the soldiers, we do this. We'll put on a song and we'll shake for 3 minutes. We'll just be like really silly and make noise and shake. And it's so invigorating. It's like when we want a cup of coffee, what we really need is a shake. I mean, I like my coffee, but I'm just saying sometimes what we need is to just shake out the energy and tune ourselves up.
Yeah, we could all use a tune-up.
We can all use a tune-up. Yeah, so as I said, we'll do a whole episode on shaking, because it's such a powerful way to really get the energy moving in your life. So I'm really glad that we had this time together to talk about love beyond words. And in episode 7, we're going to be talking about the language of touch connection. So I hope you'll all join us for that episode.
Awesome. Jeannie, thank you again. So proud.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for tuning into the Human Animal Connection Show. Please visit our website, thehumananimalconnection.org. There you can sign up for our free email newsletter, or book a consultation, or check out our blogs and resources. Our best-selling book, The Human Animal Connection, is available on Amazon. And your donation of any amount keeps our nonprofit organization providing life-changing services. You can reach Michael Overly, author of Let Your Dog Lead, Musings on How to Create an Exceptional Life, on his website at dogsandmen.com, or email michael@dogsandmen.com.